This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Biddulph Town Council YouTube page. The aim is that decision-making should be transparent and in the public domain, which will involve more of our community and local democracy. By being in this council chamber, you are consenting to being recorded and for your image to be added to the YouTube. Images and sound may be used for training purposes. Any views expressed are the speaker's own and do not necessarily reflect the view of Biddulph Town Council. Please view the guidance on recording in public meetings policy if you need more information. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Committee, Tuesday the 18th of July. Do we have any apologies for the meeting?
Yes, we have quite a few. Councillor Harper, Councillor Hawley, Councillor Holdsworth, Councillor Jones, Councillor Salt, Councillor Smith, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chief Officer. Declarations of interest. Do we have any disclosable pecuniary interests and dispensations? Okay. Any other interests? Now, I must state at this time, which I wasn't aware of when I sent out the notes, that planning application SMD 2023-0286 is for a member of this council, and therefore we will not be commenting upon that and declaring an interest, and therefore not doing that. Are we all happy with that? The policy has been in the past that we do not comment on planning applications that are either from members of the council, members of the council staff. Okay, thank you. So,
sorry, Chair, just to confirm that is quite normal practice for us. So when we submit our comments to Staffordshire Moorlands District Council, we just say Town Council makes no comment.
Okay, thank you. Right. Minutes to approve the minutes from the Planning Committee held on the 20th of June 2023. These have been through Town Council.
Have.
So are we all happy to approve those, having been through? For quick show of hands. Yep. Thank you.
We've got these to sign, Chair, if you will, if I skim them around the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, right. So item 25, standing agenda item, consider any proposed sites for local listing. Do we have any sites proposed for local listing? Chief Officer, have you any information?
I have no update on this, unfortunately. I've been trying to progress some of the ones that we've already submitted, but to date, haven't had a response from the District Council in relation to those. So I shall keep pressing and hopefully bring some of them to you in future. Can
I just check that I'm okay? As I'm not the chair of this committee, and this was not the chair of the last planning meeting, I'm okay signing these minutes?
Approved at this meeting.
Thank you.
Do the corners as well, please.
I've done the corners. Thank you.
Thank you.
If that could be slid back around to the Chief Officer.
Yeah.
Okay. So 26, to receive a verbal update on the progress with the neighbourhood plan and the neighbourhood development order. Chief Officer.
Thank you, Councillor Garvey. I don't want to jinx this, but I believe we're at the position where we all agree. I know that's a big statement. Having gone backwards and forwards with the neighbourhood plan working group as to whether they were at least content, probably not happy, but content to remove a couple of the local green spaces and to amend some of the wording, which we've done via the consultant's urban vision. I believe we've reached a point where we are all happy with the responses. So the next process for me to undertake, if you were happy with that as a committee, is for me to confirm that the planning officer will submit a report to the District Council Cabinet for them to approve, that we will then go to a period of consultation before a referendum. I guess that will be in the autumn now. So, and then that will also include the neighbourhood development order, which hasn't caused as much debate as the neighbourhood plan, but these documents will go together.
Do you need a formal proposal and vote on that for you to forward that?
I haven't got a document to bring to you. I think previously we've agreed that our position as regards that, so you can I guess a general kind of show of hands as regards that would be. There's no change from our perspective, it's just that kind of bounced around.
Okay, so can I have a show of hands for in favour of the Chief Officer forwarding that? Okay, thank you. I'd also like to go on.
Could I just ask
you can
a question concerning the referendum? Is this just a straightforward referendum? There's no percentages that have to be
No.
Got, so if it was 49, 51% in favour, it would still do 3.
That's it.
Bit like Brexit.
Yeah.
You invoked the B word. I wasn't going to, Councillor Jackson.
It's very straightforward. It's a yes or a no. Are you happy to adopt it? Yes. If there's 3 people who vote, 2 vote yes and 1 vote no, that's enough.
Fine.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, the public consultation, Sarah, is that prescribed from above, how that's got to be done? So we know exactly what we've got to, what hoops we need to jump through to get through that
Yeah.
legally.
And it's a very brief process, actually. It's a process to say, this is this document's now going to referendum. The public don't get to comment again on the wording. They've had that opportunity on several occasions. It's this is the document, this is what you can read it here. You can, have a look at it, ask any other questions. We might choose to have an event here where people can seek clarification if they want to, whatever we decide going forward. But I think we should, having come this far, should try and aim for an autumn referendum, get it done before the weather changes, and then people don't come out then, do they? So that would be nice. It'd be nice to get a highish turnout, wouldn't it, of people voting yes?
Just on the book on that.
Conscious that we won't be having a meeting in August. If we want to have an event like that, do we need to go through that now, or does that need to go through Town Council?
I won't be bringing anything back to you until September. I can't imagine it moving that quickly at district level.
I can't either, but thank you. And also I think on record for thank you for all the work that you've done in trying to push this through and the uphill struggle that I know you've had with the district council on this one. So thank you on behalf of the members of this committee.
That's only because the town one was so much better than the district one and they couldn't approve it.
You might think that I couldn't possibly comment, and it would not be right to do so
No.
from the chair.
Please don't record that.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Okay, right. So item, does anybody else any further questions on item 26 on the neighbourhood plan? Okay, move on. Yes. Okay, 27, to receive an update on the town council planning applications. Chief Officer.
Thank you. Well, those who were either involved in the planning committee meeting at the district council, or who watched it, or who've heard by the grapevine, will know that the town hall frontage planning application was approved last week. There's some consideration now for us as regards our next steps. Obviously, we, in advance of that planning permission process that we've gone through there, we were absolutely determined to meet with the family of George Humphreys, who'd put the wheel there, and to make sure they were happy. And we met with the Biddulph and Bloom team. They maintained the frontage for us as beautifully as they do. Obviously, we were kind of keen to ensure that they were happy with the idea, and both groups of people were. Through the planning committee planning application process, the plan has been on the district council website, but I think probably we should consider over the summer months working up the scheme for sponsored bricks, putting together some documents that we want people to consider for that. So you recall, if you look at the planning application for the frontage, that the wheel is set on a plinth, there's lighting, there's planting around that, and then the frontage of that is the kind of sponsored bricks in memory of people who were past miners, whether they be from Biddulph or not. Actually, we're celebrating those involved in miners, and the idea was that people would come to us and give us their wording, and we'd tell them how many letters they could have and that kind of thing. So I think we need to kind of work up some process for doing that over the next few weeks or so, and then advertise that process, and at the same time do a great big picture of what the scheme will look like. So we're absolutely clear what the intention is with regards to that.
And this is usually managed through the town hall frontage, through the town and community.
Well, there was a working group at one point when we were talking about mining memorials that went into the town community. So happy to kind of move it back into that committee. But obviously the point of setting the agendas for today, we hadn't got confirmation that the planning application had been approved. So I think there's some work, if you're happy for me to do and then bring back to town and communities, that wouldn't be till September, but I think that would fit quite nicely in terms of making sure we've got maximum impact and we're not missing people while they're on holiday over the summer.
I think that would be a good idea. As a committee, are we all happy for the chief officer to do that and take it, then move it on to the town and community agenda?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Okay, if you would, have a comment, Councillor Jackson?
Yeah, I'm just conscious of timing with this. I mean, ideally, I would love to see picks in the ground by the end of September. That's what I'd like, because if it's any later than that, then it tends to lend itself to spring before actually starting. It doesn't really. I mean, I know the work could go on through the winter months, but perhaps I know perhaps some advice from Bev on what would be, from her point of view, as project managing the process, what would be a realistic start date. So I think if we've got a start date, that would help, or potential start date. I mean, a loose one.
Yeah, okay.
That might help alongside some of the consultation work that we're doing, and also a deadline on the bricks, because obviously there's going to have to be a cut-off where we say, you know, that's it, we can't take any more. That could be because we haven't got room to put them, you know, or we're going to be left with a situation where people are ringing up at the last minute. And really what we need to do is get that list completed, and then obviously that then goes off to the manufacturer, and that work is done in one hit, rather than dribs and drabs. So I think it does need a bit of thinking about the planning side of it. So we can get some sort of idea from Bev where we are, or what the likelihood is a start date.
Yes.
I
was going to say, I think that's absolutely necessary, because there's the border between the county land and the district land potentially needs some clarification as well on the periphery of the scheme. So I'm not sure how long that process will take. I think it's a straightforward license for us, an extension to our management agreement here, but we'll need to get that ball rolling.
Right.
Can I just ask a question? Is this work that's undertaken by council employees, or is it given out to tender? I don't know, to a private company.
Bit of both, actually. So the architect that we've used is a Biddulph architect, and historically, if we've had a bigger project, she's put that out to tender on our behalf.
And has it already gone out to tender?
No, not at all.
All right. And is there an outline budget?
We got a quantity surveyor to do a piece of work.
Ah, right.
So we've got a figure. I think we're all hoping it's not that figure. It will need to go up to tender to see, you know, and then if there's any efficiencies we can make with regards to that. But yeah, there's a piece of work there, I think, and I think the hope is, of course, that we will be able to seek funding from additional pots of money as well. So again, I'm very hopeful today. I keep saying I'm hopeful, don't I? I'm hopeful that there'll be some news and some movement with the Shared Prosperity Fund as well, and that that pot of money could at least pay for professional fees or something like that.
So going forward, is this scheme dependent on further funding? So it can, you know, is it going to happen anyway? Or has this other funding got to be put in place?
You happy for me
I would imagine it.
To continue.
The town council certainly has enough money as things stand to do the scheme. That's I don't think we would have got this far had we not had the reserves to enable us to do that. As is always the case, we'd hope not to have to spend all those reserves and that we can use somebody else's money to.
We're still dependent that this negotiation for extra money, it's still negotiations for extra money from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got Councillor Jackson wants to come back in again, but I was just going to say the question of the funding for it was actually discussed and approved through a previous finance committee, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And ratified through town council. So the provision of the funding has already been through the process.
Oh, I
But
see.
if you're seeking to mitigate the costs of the town council by additional alternative funding, yes?
Just a bit tight, I think.
Yes.
I'd like to use somebody else's money rather than ours.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jackson, you want to come back again?
I think the councillors who joined recently, the history of it is the town council wanted to see this process go forward. And this was before really shared prosperity raised its head. So the town council made a decision that we were going to fund it. But obviously, if there is scope to get a bid into the shared prosperity fund, and if you actually read the officer's report on the planning application, it's virtually written, I think, it's written the application for funding for us, because it ticks so many boxes of that shared prosperity funding that the office actually written it for us in a way.
Yes, Councillor Kosicki.
Yeah, will the Coalfield Communities Fund be contacted? Because I would imagine they would have a big interest with it being a mining memorial project.
It's if I may, yeah, I mean, yeah, Coalfields Community Trust, is that the one you mean?
Yeah.
It's not something we've actually thought about, because it's not something they as an organisation would tend to fund. I mean, they may show an interest in it, but I don't think there's any chance of getting any finance out of that organisation. It's not the type of thing that they fund.
They're not short of a bob or two, I would imagine. The miners' pension funds being
Nothing to do.
I know it's not got
Certainly nothing to do with
it, but logically,
No, the one that's got the money is Siswo, and they've just had over £2 million for the land. Just over the border there.
Okay,
All I
So you wanted to come in on that?
When we've had the funding fair here at the town hall before, I've had some tentative discussions, and we're not, the focus of that pot of money is absolutely on the Biddulph East area of town, so we don't really fall into that, and it isn't historically typically the type of project that they would support. But we can make an approach and say we now have a planning up, is there an element of this scheme that they could think about funding? And we'll do that with lots of other funders as well, and say, actually, this is what we're working up, can at least you fund the lighting in this, or can you fund some bricks in this, or, if we can stack some different funding together, that would be the priority.
do we need to think about putting an item, because the next meeting, the only meeting we've got before the August break will be the finance meeting, won't it? In just over a week's time, is it worth putting something on that agenda to pick up the point that Councillor Jackson was making about getting a commitment in terms of the timeline for the work?
Well, I was going to say, I'm not sure how quickly we'll get a response to some of these, because I do need to pick up the idea of the licenses for the county bit of land, and so there's a few things to slot into place yet. I can put an item on the next week's agenda. That's no problem at all. I'm not 100% sure I'd have any feedback.
Okay, I'll say.
I did have a conversation with Sarah earlier in the week. Yesterday.
That was earlier in the week.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to set up a meeting with two of the board members of the Shared Prosperity, at least two of the board members from the Shared Prosperity Fund, to actually run this scheme past them a little bit, so it's just past them really, and just put a spade in the ground and see where we go with it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, right.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that? Can we move on? Okay, right. We have an item here requested by Councillor Hawley, the management of the Wickenstone Rocks. I have no information on that. Do you have anything, Chief Officer?
Spoke to Councillor Hawley about this. The item on the agenda here is following the finance committee that we had 2-3 weeks ago, and there was some debate about the ownership and the management of the Wickenstone Rocks, and it was felt at that meeting that it would be a good opportunity to come here and look at who was managing that area and who could potentially manage that area in the future. So I think possibly it's that some exploration of that is needed. If you as a committee will kind of give your consent for us to look at land ownership issues and explore that in a bit more detail.
Okay, Councillor Jackson, and
One of the things that we need to find out about that, because I mean, there's some really interesting ideas been bounced about to what we could possibly do with that piece of land. But I think we need to find out about public access to that area as well, because it's no good really us doing a lot up there if public can't get to it. I mean, when I was a kid, the well-worn path took, you know, we used to spend many a happy hour sitting on the top of them rocks. But I don't think that's there anymore. The route we used to go, but
I believe, for information, I believe that those rocks are actually included in the climber's guide for this area, actually, along with the ones at Rock End.
all right.
Councillor Edmund, you had a comment?
Perhaps comment. Having been doing a lot of rock climbing, there was mention made of rocks, but not the specific routes on them. I don't know what more modern, but certainly in my time, they were mentioned passing almost today.
Yes.
There were rocks there, but you needed at that stage, and that's where I'm getting a little bit confused about London, Wickenstone, rock, etc. That it did state then, and certainly I did ask permission from the farm, I think it was, Wickenstone's farm, to actually go climbing on the Wickenstone. And I could only do so if I produced a certificate of insurance, basically, which you could obtain in those days from the British Council for mountaineering. So, can you explain a bit more of the background and why we've suddenly taken interest in what something I've always considered to be private ownership?
I think, if I may,
Yes, you may.
there's discussion about a potential change of private ownership in that area. And so consideration about whether there might be other options available to us.
Things have been happening up there for months or something, but now cattle or any grazing.
Are these the ones where the where the milkshake place is, or are they the ones at Rock End where they all climbed as kids?
That was that they were looking at.
Do we have clarity on that, which rocks they are?
I think it's those. I don't know.
Well, because there are the rocks, there are rocks that are definitely in.
Stone itself set away from those rocks further
Yeah,
along.
it is.
Because it's quite a big overhanging thing.
Yeah.
That's what the fascination as a young
Whereas
I had with it.
Whereas the Rock End rocks are a different set of rocks, but they're listed as two separate locations. So is what you're asking for this committee to agree for you to undertake further investigations?
And come back to you.
Right. Are we all happy that the chief officer takes further investigations?
Yeah.
Quick shower.
Place where there was some confusion whether somebody was living there.
That I think that's
Okay.
the issues.
Okay, right. Quick show of hands on. Are we all happy with that? Okay, thank you. Yes, chief officer, you have free reign.
Shall delve away. Thank you.
We noticed in Biddle
Yeah. Right, okay. So moving on to planning applications. We have 4 planning applications. We're not going to discuss 0286, so please disregard my comments on that. So SMD 2023-0295. This is the where are we? The demolition of a detached garage and no, yes, no, I'm looking at the wrong one. Proposed extension to an existing dwelling. Okay, so there was pre-planning advice in terms of a 30-minute call. It's a proposed extension to the existing dwelling. Has everyone or anyone seen the plans of this? It's a 2-story extension at the side of property. It's going to within about half a metre of the plot boundary. It's adding a breakfast room, a utility room, enlarging the bathroom, a 3rd bedroom and enlarged bedroom, plus a WC on the 1st floor. The ground floor is currently approximately 34.5 metres square. It's going to extend to 53.7. The first floor 28.5 to 45.7. That's based on the plan on the plans on the dimensions on the rather sketchy plans that have been provided that were provided. There are some discrepancies between the plans in terms of visually they look different. The property itself is a semi-detached, but it's at the back in Biddulph as you're going up past the Mitras entrance on the other side of the road. It's effectively behind the property that's on the main road. It appears to have a pedestrian access up the side, and there's parking spaces at the front. I have concerns in that it's a very significant extension. It's from my calculations, it's more than 50% of the existing floor space. It goes very close to the boundary, and it will create a much larger solid block because the current the current adjunct to the property is smaller setback and rendered and looks separate, and this will provide a much bigger block. So based on that, my recommendation would be for refusal on grounds of overdevelopment. Anyone have any comments?
Yeah, there's lots of which one's the best one from your? There's a number of appendices.
It's actually it's quite complicated, isn't it, this one, because there's
Appendix C is the existing and proposed property in relation to boundary lines.
Yeah, that will take you to that will give you the picture, I think, of how close it's going to the boundary. It's very difficult to get a decent picture of it in terms of looking on the Google Maps. But you can see that it's effectively extending. The dotted line takes you to approximately say within half a metre, I think, of the far boundary.
It's the actual address.
The address is 278 New Street. 276 New Street effectively abuts the road, and 278 is behind it.
What side?
Pardon?
Mitras, entrance to Mitras.
Opposite the entrance to Mitras. Familiar with the area? There's a parking area with a very solid high brick wall. This is the property behind that's effectively adjoined to it.
Not been on planning for a long time. What is the maximum figure?
I think it's 50%. A 50% increase in floor space in the original floor space.
I thought it was about 30, but you know, I don't know.
Well, this is greater than 50%.
You think it's greater than 50?
Well, from the dimensions they've given on their drawings, I've done a quick back of a fag packet calculation on those, and they are I think it's a 57% increase in floor plan.
If the limit's 50%, is that sufficient reason?
I think that is sufficient reason, but I think also the impression that it will give, because it will be a more square, solid building, was it'll actually be quite imposing. But again, happy to take any other comments, any other recommendations.
Our recommendation just be concerns about size of the extension. And leave it at that and let the officers sort that one out.
We can leave it in the officer's hands.
So when there's a hard and fast rule, they get the calculator out and work it out, and it's a yay or nay. There's no grey area.
Okay, so are you proposing that we make no adverse comments and raise the concern regarding the concern about overdevelopment and the imposing nature of the new structure?
That's what I would propose, Chair.
Okay. Are we all happy with that?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, so have you got that?
Concern about overdevelopment, and imposing nature of the structure.
And the visually imposing new elevations. It's going to be quite big and solid. At the moment, the second half on the plans that goes out the back is actually a lower roof line and white rendered, and this will take it up. to a higher roof line and a more solid, imposing structure. Okay, right. Okay. We then move on to the two that came in late, one that came in on the Friday, which was included in the original notes I sent you, which was the retrospective planning application for the upgrades at the Rose and Crown Public House on New Street, Biddulphmore. It's a retrospective application for upgrades to an existing outdoor seating area, including the erection of a standalone shelter structure, new surrounding paving and a new section of low-level brick wall. Those of you who've been through Biddulphmore recently will have seen it. It's a fairly large building at the back of the public house's car park. Essentially, they're constructing a standalone beer barn building at the back of the pub car park. The dimensions are 14 metres by 6 metres by 3 metres high. It extends to within 1 to 2.5 metres of the boundary. There's an erection of a low curving wall. They've built a low curving wall into the car park. There is also an additional low wall in front of the existing front steps onto the footpath to provide ramped access to the front door. This isn't specifically mentioned in the planning application. Was it included in the plans? So there's a fairly extensive supporting document around supporting and maintaining the viability of the only pub in Biddulphmore. I think that's not strictly true, as we do have the Foxhound further up the road. So I think they are rather over-egging it there. The argument being it's required to meet post-COVID public demand for an outdoor social space and to maintain the historic village pub. They're quoting the NPPF guidelines, various paragraphs, and the Staffordshire Moorlands local plan. And I think it does comply with our neighbourhood plan in terms of enterprise and tourism development, in terms of expanding and increasing the viability of a local business. It might also come under either new or existing community facilities. So there are no specific supporting statement other than the design and access statement from the builder, from the planners. But there are no objections on the site registered when I looked at the site on the 14th. My recommendation on this, in the absence of any valid neighbours planning objections, there don't appear to be anybody, that we recommend approval, but we do comment on the omission of the additional wall at the front of the pub. I think it's actually for very good reasons to provide accessible access to the ramp, but I think it should have been included, as it actually does encroach on the footpath.
If I may, I think that's a highways concern rather than a planning concern.
Yeah, it may well be highways rather than planning.
I think
They've built a low brick wall that wasn't there before, so on.
yeah, I think
I don't know.
use land.
So I would still sort of recommend approval. There's been no adverse comments. There's been no objections raised. General feeling?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to propose no adverse comment.
Are we all happy to recommend? Well, they're requesting approval of a retrospective planning permission. So do we recommend approval in terms of it complying with our neighbourhood plan, enterprise and tourism strategies?
Yeah.
I think we should take a positive stand on this in terms of there's been no objections locally about it, and I think as a resident of Biddulphmore, although not a frequenter of the pub very often, I think it's very well supported within the village and has been an asset to the community. But okay.
So to be clear, Chair, you want to add no adverse comments, subject to neighbours' valid planning concerns.
So we'd recommend I would say we recommend approval, subject to no neighbours' valid planning concerns.
You want to reference the relevant neighbourhood plan policies.
I think that would be relevant in terms of from our own strategies. Okay. And not only that, it also puts a stake in the ground on that.
Like,
okay, so we're all happy with that? Thank you. And then finally, Mr. and Mrs. N. Dunn, Raghall Farm. This one came in very late, and I apologise that you've only just seen it this evening. It's an application to determine if prior approval is required for a proposed change of use of an agricultural building to one dwelling house, and for building operations reasonably necessary for the conversion. Obviously, no planning, no pre-application advice, because it's actually looking for whether they should have an application. It's the conversion of an existing stone barn with tiled roof, brick wrap, and the material should be retained, they're saying. The planning application, or the notification is about determining if prior approval is required to convert an agricultural building to 2 dwelling houses. But then it goes on to talk about converting a derelict barn to a single 2-storey dwelling. So I'm not certain what the issues, where those confusions come from, apart from perhaps the fact that there has been a previous application that's been approved for a second barn. Looking at the plans of this, it's on the screen there, it looks very familiar. So I think we've seen something, either a mirror image structure previously, because I remember seeing those plans that are almost identical to those come through this committee. Looking at the information they're presented, there are reasonable highway views from the entrance in terms of, there doesn't think there'll be any highways issues, 75 metres in one direction, 120 metres visibility in the other. As I say, they've had a previous application for a second barn conversion already approved in January of this year. And the letter of the law suggests that 3 dwellings would be permitted on the site of a agricultural building. So there would now be 3 dwellings on that property, the original farmhouse and these 2 converted barns. They have had a BAT survey done, which basically says that there are 2 species present and they require an EPS license to mitigate disturbance. And they provided a structural survey which suggests it's generally sound, but the first floor needs replacing and the ground floor is effectively an agricultural floor for drainage. So there's significant work to be done there. It's in the green belt. I think it's a bit complicated, I think, on this one in terms of the extensive conversion work. I would suggest, and I'm open to debate here, that the green belt location and the BAT survey results suggest that planning approval should be required, and we should basically say, yes, you need to get planning permission. But perhaps defer it to the planning officers, because they would know the letter of the law on this, and it seems to be navigating quite a complex piece of legislation. I think you need to be a solicitor to get head and tail out of some parts of that document. Councillor Smith, welcome.
Yeah.
You had a comment.
I was just going to say what you just said then about deferring to the planning officers because of the complexity of the sort of plans and everything, but it's basically an application to ask if they need to apply.
Yeah, and
they would need to.
Yes, my comment would be that recommendation is that we would say yes, they do need it, but we'd refer it to the planning officer's judgment. Are we all happy with that as a recommendation?
I think just trying to do one thing up. I think what they're saying is that they've been given approval to convert this barn to a dwelling house. They want to change it into 2 dwelling houses. But it doesn't read like.
No, it doesn't. It reads that a previous application for a second barn conversion had already been approved. They've already had 1 barn. There are two barns on the site, and I'm convinced those plans that are being submitted are exactly the same plans as we've seen before. But I think they're asking, do they need to have planning permission? And I think the answer would be yes. But the planning officers would be people to make the definitive decision.
Seems like they're after planning permission for 5 altogether. 3 that have been approved.
It's the read. I think it's. I struggled to actually understand exactly what they were trying to do, and there's a lot of referencing this document and that document and planning regulation this and planning regulation that. I was feeling a bit out of my depth in terms of the details of the planning, which is why I would refer it to the planning officers for the decision, but I would suggest that it probably does need planning permission, as I have nothing else, because they'll need to have a proper license because of the bats. And with it being in the green belt, and I think all green belt development should be referred through the planning processes. Did that make sense, Chief Officer, for something you can coherently put down as a recommendation?
I wouldn't necessarily I think you need to add the last bit about putting it down to the planning officer. Yes, we think a coherent plan needs putting forward, and the planning officer will make the decision anyway. So we don't need to
No,
tell them to
okay.
do that, because that's their job to do that anyway. So
Okay, so in that case, our recommendation will be that it will need, we'll need a full planning application. And
and one
leave it at
that,
that.
you know, is a coherent plan that doesn't reference, you know,
Yeah.
every other
yes,
previous documents that, you know,
it needs,
can't make in the tail of
it needs to be a clearly defined plan for this property.
absolutely.
Hmm.
I think that-
Councillor Smith.
Just as a side note, the BAT survey was done in September 2021. So there might be some,
It might have changed.
yeah, some validity issues as far as that's concerned. But
That's a very good point, Councillor Smith. Perhaps in that case, we need to say they need to have an up-to-date BAT survey as well. Can we add that comment in, please?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. We all happy with that? Can I have a quick show of hands that we're all happy with that?
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, moving on, decisions received from the district. Anything that we need to be aware of there? We recommended, are there any discrepancies? Approval? I don't think there are any discrepancies between what we've recommended and what's gone through at the council, the district, and we have no appeals, I believe.
No.
Okay, I think that concludes the business of this meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance.
Thank you.